Today I'm sharing an eerie story from John Parris, Strange Happenings About Chimney Rock, North Carolina. Legends have encrusted Chimney Rock almost as thickly as its clinging lichens. They are legends of strange happenings in a strange land that time and erosion have fashioned into bold, towering cliffs and knife-like crevices. The Cherokee Indians told of a ghostly tribe called the Little People that ruled the cliffs and gorges about Chimney Rock long before the white man came this way. Early settlers told of seeing a ghostly host swarming about the great monolith that stands clear of the surrounding precipices like a raised defiant fist. They also told of seeing two troops of cavalry clashing in combat in the sky above the rock. Both the story of the ghostly host and the cavalry clash were widely published in newspapers at the time. The first occurred in July 1806. The time was about 6 p.m. and Patsy Reeves, a widow woman, was in her cabin preparing the evening meal. Less than a mile away, Chimney Rock towered toward the sky. Some 50 yards below the cabin was a cotton patch, and there Patsy's two children, Elizabeth 8 and Morgan 11, were playing. Elizabeth happened to look up toward Chimney Rock. She saw a man on the mountain. He was rolling rocks off the mountain and picking up sticks. She called to her brother and said, "Look at that man up there." He looked to where she pointed. "Why, there's a heap of people up there," he said. "Look at them things flying through the air." The children began shouting. Another of Patsy's daughters, 14-year-old Polly, and another woman heard their shouts and came running. They called to Mrs. Reeves to come and see what a sight yonder was. Mrs. Reeves came running and stopped to gaze in awe at the mountain. What she saw was a very numerous crowd of beings resembling the human species, but she couldn't discern any particular members of the human body nor distinction of sexes. But as they were of every size, from the tallest man down to the least infants, more of the small than the full-grown, and all clad in brilliant white raiment. They appeared to rise off the side of the mountain south of the rock and about as high. A considerable part of the mountain's top was visible above this shining host, and they moved in a northern direction and collected about Chimney Rock. When all but a few had reached the Chimney Rock, two of them seemed to rise together, and behind them about 2 feet a third rose. These three moved with great agility toward the crowd and had the nearest resemblance to men of any before seen. While beholding these three, Mrs. Reeves' eyes were attracted by 3 more rising from nearly the same place and moving swiftly in the same order and direction. During this view, which they all agreed afterwards lasted upward of an hour, Mrs. Reeves sent for a man named Robert Searcy. He didn't come right away, and about 15 minutes later she sent another message to him, and he showed up. In telling about it later, Searcy said he came not expecting to see anything extraordinary, and when first asked if he saw the people on the mountain, he shook his head. However, looking a second time, he saw more glittering white appearance of humankind than he had ever seen of men at any general review. Searcy said they were of all sizes, from that of men to infants. He said they moved in throngs about the rock, not far from Chimney Rock, and they were about the height of the Chimney Rock, and moved in a semicircle course between him and the mountain to the place where Mrs. Reeves had said they rose. 2 of a full size went before the general crowd about the space of 20 yards. And as they respectively came to this place, they vanished out of sight, leaving a solemn and pleasing impression on the mind, accompanied with a diminution of bodily strength, Searcy said. Mrs. Reeves, Searcy, and the children related what they had seen to the Reverend George Newton of Buncombe County, and it was agreed that he should communicate it to J. Gales, editor of the Raleigh Register and State Gazette. In concluding his communication to the editor, Newton said, "Whether the above be accountable on a philosophical principle, or whether it be a prelude to the descent of the Holy City, I leave it to the impartially curious to judge." A few years later, in 1811, the story of the cavalry fight was reported in the newspapers. The witnesses were an old man and his wife who lived in the gap below what was then known as Chimney Rock Falls. Their recital created so much interest in nearby Rutherfordton that a public meeting was held, and a delegation headed by General Miller and General Walton with a magistrate and a clerk visited the old couple and took their affidavits. They said, in effect, for several evenings, while shadows filled the pass and sunlight still lingered on the mountain summits, they had seen from their doorway 2 bodies of cavalry advance toward each other across the sky. They heard the charge sounded and saw them meet in conflict with flashing swords, groans, shouts of victory, and then disappear. 3 more settlers testified as witnesses of the same vision. They were all believed trustworthy, but evidently deluded by some natural phenomenon. Scientists since then have laid the strange happenings to optical phenomena known as mirages, but a heap of folks disagree. Be that as it may, the legends have encrusted Chimney Rock almost as thickly as its clinging lichens. And whether it's mirage or magic, you have to agree that this land of time-sculptured rocks is one to stir the most laggard imagination. So that's a dandy story for today. Appalachians are really known as storytellers from the time you're just a little child and all the way up into your older years. We really, our whole culture is surrounded by stories. A lot of them, most of them, are family stories that are passed down from one generation to the next. Many of those are just heartwarming, humorous, funny, inspiring when you think about the hardships they went through. But a lot of them also kind of have the supernatural about them, whether that's in a religious way, which this one kind of has the overtones of that. Was that a battle between good and evil? You know, what were those people fighting? Or whether it's more of the Halloween spooky type of tales. Those are all very common in Appalachia, often called haunt tales or haint tales. You'll hear about haints. But it's all a part of the culture of Appalachia, and I hope you enjoyed this little story today.